What's up, people? So this is Q&A. You guys know that I love to answer questions. Keeps your mind sharp, teaches you how to think, keeps me sharp in regards to refreshing my knowledge. So let's just roll through these, and I'm going to answer as many as I can. All right, so first question, my buddy John Doyle asked about esoteric detox methods. So I do have one to share with you guys. There is a book from the early 1990s, Sauna Detoxification with Niacin by Dr. David E. Root and also his son Daniel. And this book, it lays out a protocol that he developed over a few decades where you detox the body through sauna, particularly infrared sauna, not just conventional sauna. Infrared sauna because the heat penetrates deeper into the skin, and then you combine this with niacin, and the combination leads to an immense release of the body's tissues, particularly your body's fat cells. And this method is esoteric, and it was originally developed for the Scientology Institute or Scientologist. It was developed for Ron L. Hubbard, which maybe that makes you doubtful it, maybe you don't care, but Dr. Root, he considered it a very valid method of detoxification. He published anecdotal case studies on it. He treated Gulf War veterans with it who were suffering from Gulf War syndrome, which his perspective was that was a toxification disease due to exposures in the oil fields, due to vaccines the soldiers were given, due to medications they took to protect them from nerve gas, which were themselves toxins. And Dr. Root made the point that the body's fat cells in particular, there are many fat-soluble toxins that get stored in them, and when you do his detox protocol over so many days and weeks, you eventually get rid of all those toxins. And there's also a replenishment protocol at the same time because you're also losing lots of electrolytes. You need to replenish that as well. So I would just suggest getting the book, versus just trying to do it off of what I'm saying right now. But if you want to read about something cool that could potentially improve your health, check his published work out. So next question from Bobby Graham, how to fix muscle imbalance asymmetry. So I get asked this a lot, and there's a few different contexts for this. Number one, if you are a beginner to training, you've never lifted weights before in your life, and you start training, and you'll find out that your right hand's stronger than your left hand, or vice versa. Maybe your right bicep is bigger, maybe your left leg is bigger. There's a discrepancy there. This is entirely normal, and this typically evens out within the first 2 years of training. You don't need to do anything special to fix that kind of imbalance. It's simply a lack of coordination. You're untrained. What I do recommend doing as part of your overall training is doing bilateral movements, which is both limbs working at the same time. That'd be a squat, a deadlift, a bench press, a pull, Minerva row, and also doing unilateral exercises, which are exercises that work one side of the body at a time. So a lunge, a split squat, a one-arm dumbbell row. If you do bilateral movements, and then you also do one or two unilateral exercises in a workout, you do that in your first 1 to 2 years of training, you will be more or less equally strong on your right and left side. And like I said, it's not something that you specifically need to fix. Now, someone else had the question of, what about if you're an athlete, you're a baseball pitcher, and there's a big discrepancy between shoulder mobility, let's say between your right side, left side, lat flexibility. That's a bit more specific, but the question I always pose to that is your asymmetry causing pain? Because if it's not causing pain, and it's not inhibiting any kind of function in day-to-day life, there's no loss of function anywhere. You can just tell when you do certain exercises that the right and left side are not equal. It's not necessarily a problem. Charlie Francis makes this great point in a lot of his written and published work. I think Speed Trap, or it might be a different book, but Charlie Francis, who is a fantastic all-time sprint coach from Canada, passed away some years ago, probably one of the best sprint coaches of all time. He said that asymmetry is normal, and athletes can be world-class performers and still have asymmetry. It's not a big deal. It's not a problem unless it's presenting problems in daily life. So unilateral, bilateral, do that in your training if you're a beginner. And for everybody else, be objective as to whether or not it's a real problem. Next question comes from Brandon Walsh, working out with sciatica pain, what to do about it. So I'm not a physical therapist, I'm not a doctor, I'm a personal trainer. My experience with most bodily pains, things like low back pain, people have generic low back pain, people's knees kind of hurt, non-specific pains people experience, those things usually resolve themselves with conventional regular exercise. If you come to the gym and you start bodybuilding, what I call bodybuilding, you're doing your squats, you're doing your deadlifts, you're doing your presses, you're doing some one-arm movements, you're building muscle, you're getting stronger. Most of your non-specific pains will resolve themselves over a 3 to 6 month time period. Your body will stop hurting because there's nothing actually wrong with your skeleton, you were just physically weak. Now, something like sciatic pain, maybe you do have very weak glutes, maybe you sit too much, maybe you have hypertonicity in your lower back muscles or your hip muscles, your glute muscles, maybe manual massage could be helpful. There's no set protocol to give you. You have to try different approaches and see what works, see what alleviates that pain. I've trained older people who had sciatic pain. The reality is they just had weak butts. They had no glute muscle at all. They build glute muscles. They start squatting, sciatic pain starts to go away. It was, in fact, that simple. I've had clients that had recurrent pain that was not resolved by exercising, but they also sit a lot and travel a lot and are on long-haul 20-hour flights, and that was probably more of a contributing factor than something being physically wrong structurally with their body. So exercise first, and if that doesn't do it, seek out the appropriate specialist. So next question, or next set of questions comes from John Pontius. I'll go through these in order. Dad advice. So for those who don't know, I'm a father of 2, and hopefully we got many more on the way. I became a father about 2.5 years ago. So I'm a new dad. I'm not a veteran dad. I haven't been a dad for 20 years. The best dad advice I could give right now, you are raising sons or daughters to be adults. You're not just raising children. So I'm not going to get into the particulars of my approach to parenting. I'm a new parent. But the one thing I do think about often with my kids is that I am raising them to be eventually functional, capable adults in a world that I am actively contributing to right now, and I want them to be high-performing people. So, especially for sons, enjoy your time with your sons. They are children, they're little kids, have fun with them. But certainly as your children get older, you want to keep that in mind, that they're going to be adults. Your son especially is going to be a man far longer than he's a boy. And your daughter is going to be a woman for far longer than she is a girl. So are you raising good and strong men and women, or are you just solely focused on the present with them being the age that they are now? So, and there's a balance to strike there, obviously. But that's the best, I think, piece of advice I can give you that's top of mind. Next question on online marketing or writing technique. I'm not sure really what the question is with this. Marketing is telling people that you exist. I've done business courses before with people. I did a how to make money online cohort a few years ago. Marketing is your distribution and letting people know that you exist, your product exists, that your service exists. That's what it is. The best companies in the world, every company in the world that's successful, they market somehow, some way. If people don't know that you're around, no one's going to buy from you. It's that basic. So, with marketing, very often the obstacle for, I think, like beginners, new people, the concept is they don't want to share what they're doing. They don't want to talk about too much. There's this assumption that if you posted about it one time or you made a video one time, that everyone knows now, and that's completely irrational. It makes no sense. I've been talking about the same stuff in fitness and health for years, and I still have people, longtime followers even, asking questions that I think I answered 3 years ago. But I didn't answer it for them because they didn't hear it. The same way when we see advertisements, even if we know that a company exists and we see the advertisement one time, we'll probably need exposure to that advertisement or that content multiple times before we make a decision. So with marketing, I would say more is always better. Maintaining muscle while in a calorie deficit. So this comes down to protein intake. The good heuristic, that many people follow, that I follow, that's given out constantly, is 1 gram per pound of body weight, or if you use kilograms, 2 grams per kilo. That is very idiot-proof. Now, if you actually dig into the scientific literature, you'll see that it's a little bit less than that. It's actually 1.6 grams per kilo, or it's 0.8 grams per pound. Although there are some researchers, some people who I respect, who say it's higher. Maybe it is 1 to 1, or maybe it is 2 grams per kilo. And if you're a hard training athlete, or if you're in a fat loss phase, perhaps it needs to be like 1.25 grams per pound. Just get in 1 gram per pound of weight. For those of you guys who use the American imperial system. If you do that while you're dieting, you shouldn't lose muscle mass. Now, if you do notice muscle mass loss, you think, increase the protein intake. It's very common in the natural bodybuilding world and the enhanced bodybuilding world that guys will have very high protein intakes, at 250 grams, 300 grams. And that seems absurd maybe to like the layman. But when you're dieting and you're deep in a calorie deficit and it's been 12, 16 weeks, every little bit of protein helps. Now, I know some coaches might disagree with this, but for dieting especially, more protein is usually better. So for avoiding muscle loss, that's my recommendation. 1 gram per pound, and go higher if necessary. Next question about being a squash player, my perspective on squash. Not to be a jerk, I've never watched squash in my life. I have absolutely no opinion on it. I guess it's a racket sport, and I don't care about squash at all. Go ask a squash coach about how to get better at squash for this one. I can't help you. Next question from Arend, however you say that name. My diet. So my diet is a bro diet, which I talk about constantly. It's based around protein intake with every meal, high protein intake, 1 gram per pound of weight being the goal. If you're a little underneath that, that's okay. But high protein intake, whole foods, with as few processed foods as possible, emphasis on whole foods, meat, carbohydrates, vegetables, eating 3 to 4 times a day, or maybe 2 times a day, but larger meals, and keeping it simple. I've shared my meals before: shrimp and rice, beef and rice, throw in some veggies, season it however you want. The bro diet, which I could talk about in a separate video, all bros, everyone in fitness more or less eats the same things. Everybody talks about protein intake being important. Yes. Everybody talks about carbohydrates. Your carbohydrate intake depends upon your activity levels. If you're inactive, low carb. If you're very active, more carbohydrates. Fat intake, you need a certain amount of fat in your diet to have healthy hormonal function. So, fat calories, probably about 10% minimum, but more likely 20%, maybe 30% of calories. People can argue about the macros and the ratios. Is it 30-40-30 or 40-30-40? What about carnivore? Sure, if you have autoimmune issues and carbohydrates have poisoned you for some reason, okay, so don't eat them. But again, everybody's eating the same stuff. All the bros, all the fit fam, all the fit chicks, all the fitness professionals, we're all eating the same thing. Everybody's having beef and chicken and rice and trying to get in 40-50 grams per meal or more. There's very little true differentiation. It's a lot of just arguing over details. But that's a bro diet. Whole foods, natural foods, high protein intake, drink water, and get in your micronutrients. And then everything else, you sort of figure that out in the experimentation application process. Last question for this video: are thoughts considered a topic? No. So this has become a running joke with my following for years. Thoughts are not a question. Thoughts are never a question. Why? Because thoughts, the word thoughts, is decontextualized. A good question is a line of inquiry where you're trying to identify an explanation. You're trying to distinguish between cause and effect. Maybe you didn't understand the answer that was given and you want clarification. So a good answer, or a good question I should say, a good question has context. Thoughts has no context. You can attach thoughts to any word. Water, thoughts. I don't know what that means. Are you asking me whether I like to drink water? Are you asking me about water filters? I mean, here's the thing. Now, when you say thoughts, now I'm trying to figure out what I think you're asking based off a single word with a question mark on it. Are you asking me about heavy metals in water? Is the water turning the frogs gay? I don't know, because it's not a question. It's you being intellectually lazy. There's this parable in Judaism where a man has, I think, 3 sons, and he has a son that doesn't know he should ask questions, and he has a son who doesn't know how to ask questions, and then he has a son that asks questions, and he asks questions clearly. And most of you are sons 1 and 2. You're not asking questions, or if you are, you don't know how to ask them because you're asking thoughts. Thoughts is not a question. Articulate your questions, and the more you can articulate them, it forces you to examine your thinking and figuring out what you're really asking, and that will make you a smarter, wiser person. So that's it for today, guys and girls. I will talk to you all again. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.